Good morning. Welcome in. We are live here on YouTube. You can find me Trevor Steinbacher's page on YouTube. Excuse me. And on Instagram at Steinbacher TS. Follow me on Twitter at Trev's Fantasy Pod and like my new Facebook page, The Rumbles of Red on Facebook. Thanks for joining us this morning. Jump right into week 13 action already. It seems like the season has flown by, but you are probably either in a must-win situation. Maybe you're playing for a seed this week, or like I am in multiple leagues in our second week of our first round of the playoffs. Let's jump right in. The quarterback of the week, we're going Aaron Rodgers. He's my cash game lineup here on the main slate. The Packers 28.5 implied points as a team. That's the highest on the slate this week. And it doesn't really matter. Aaron Rodgers faced the Chicago Bears last week and throws 4 touchdown passes. Like, he doesn't care about the defenses. He doesn't care about the matchups. He's a bad man. He is on a mission this year. And maybe it was the Jordan Love draft pick. I don't know. But Aaron Rodgers has looked great this season, and I expect that to continue this week, as I think he'll end up as our QB1. A streaming quarterback play for you this week. I talked about Ryan Tannehill a little bit on the podcast on Friday in our start sit segment. I think Kirk Cousins is also a great streaming option. The Jags are terrible. We all know that. They're 1-10. They hurt us in week 1 in the survivor pool when a lot of people picked the Colts. That was the only Jaguars win of the year. Kirk Cousins, back-to-back QB1 weeks. And I think Kirk Cousins makes it 3 weeks in a row that he's a QB1 for your fantasy team. You can go ahead and queue him up and stream him if you need a quarterback streamer. This morning, I couldn't do this without one of my good sponsors, Homefront CG. Go ahead and find his Facebook page. Give him a like. Share his page, Homefront at Homefront CG. Chris is a great realtor, great friend. Make sure you support the sponsors, please, and as they help me get through this and help me build this brand and this podcast. Again, it's at Homefront CG. Top running back of the week, Derek Cook. That's who it's going to be, Derek Cook. Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry. You can flip a coin and take your best guess. I am taking Henry this week over Dalvin in cash. So that means Dalvin will probably go off. But I'm going to actually go different. I'm going to take Austin Ekeler this week against the New England Patriots. 16 targets last week. You love to see that from Austin Ekeler. And I think with Keenan Allen getting shadowed by Stephon Gilmore, I think we really got to lower our expectations from Keenan Allen this week. Look for a lot of dump-offs. I don't expect 16 targets. That's hard to expect. But I do expect around 12 targets again for Austin Ekeler, and he can take any one of those to the house. I think he has a big game this week. A couple other running backs I like in daily fantasy today. David Montgomery, $6,200. I talked about him this week on Friday's podcast against Detroit. Horrible defense. Should be a top 12 running back and at a great price of just $6,200. It's hard to ignore that in daily fantasy. Myles Gaskin, $5,500. A little bit cheaper than Montgomery in a very similar situation. He's going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about how bad Detroit's defense is. Cincinnati's nearly just as bad. Gaskin should be the workhorse back this week. Miami, they've always wanted a number one, a guy who's going to do everything for them. We saw it in Ahmed. We saw it earlier in the season with Gaskin a little bit. And then, unfortunately for them, a lot of injuries throughout the season. They haven't had a consistent number one. So this week, Gaskin gets the call. All the rest of them are hurt. I think Patrick Laird might be active, but Washington is out. Ahmed is out. It's going to be all Myles Gaskin there this week. And again, the low price of $5,500 for a cowbell running back. You like that a lot for daily, and he's definitely a startable running back in season long as well. And then Devontae Booker, $6,000. I'll talk about him here in a little while as well, but I like him this week filling in for Josh Jacobs. Moving on to wide receiver, there's a lot of great wide receivers out there currently. I mean, you got DK and Devontae Adams, and you got Adam Thielen this week. DeAndre Hopkins has been quiet. When does he come back out? Julio Jones is active again this week. There's a lot of guys at the top of the game. That doesn't even include Tyreek Hill tonight. We saw what he did last week. But this week, I'm going to go a little deeper. I'm going to go with a guy that I talked about a little bit this week already, but that's Robert Woods. Again, I gave the stats already, but they bear repeating. He dominated the Arizona Cardinals last year. 13 for 172 in one of the games, 7 for 61 and a touchdown in the other game. He'll be shadowed by Patrick Peterson, and nobody's going to be worried about that. 15 and 12 are their targets over the last 2 games. I think Robert Woods could end up as our number 1 wide receiver on the week. A couple other wide receivers I like this week if you're playing daily fantasy. Jarvis Landry, season long, he should be in your starting lineup. He's most definitely wide receiver 2 status this week. He's 6,000 on FanDuel. Liked what we saw last week. Finally, he gets a game that he's not worried about the weather. I think it's a big factor that we don't talk enough about. Cleveland had 2 games in a row that were just terrible with the weather. Finally, he gets a nice game last week, and Jarvis paves off. He needs to be in your starting lineups for season long. He's a decent daily fantasy play this week too, against a bad Tennessee defense. They haven't stopped anybody, so we're not worried about Tennessee in that defense. Kiki Cutie at 4,800 and Brandon Cooks at 6,500. Both guys should get an uptick in targets this week due to Will Fuller being suspended. I don't know. I'm not going to be exposed to a lot of them. I think they'll be very high owned in daily. I think Brandon Cooks is wide receiver 2 season long. Cutie, I would say, is more like a dart throw flex. If you really needed just to throw a dart at somebody, you could throw on here for season long, but I would try to avoid him in season long. Michael Pittman Jr., $5,600 on FanDuel, 9 targets last week. He didn't produce on those 9 targets, but you like to see the target volume there. I think he should bounce back in a game that is one of the higher totals on the week. And I heard the other day about the Indianapolis Colts and some of their totals. They have been absolutely ridiculous, 70s and 60s. I think the lowest over the past 4 or 5 weeks was 55. So this team is in a lot of high-scoring games. Give me a little bit of that with Michael Pittman Jr. I think he's a flex play season long this week. Want to thank SM Auto Detailing, another great sponsor, has been helping us out here on the podcast. Go find him on Facebook. It's just SM Auto Detailing. The logo is an SM on it. You'll be able to see it. You'll know it's him. Go look him up. I like him on Facebook, so if you're friends with me, it'll show you that. But give him a like on Facebook. Go to his website, smautodetailing.com. Get your free quote. He does interior and exterior cleaning of your cars, and he does a really good job. So I just thank you, and I would like you to go thank him and go look him up. And if anything, just give him a like on Facebook so you can keep up with what he's doing. Last position here, tight ends. I'm going to go Travis Kelce at top tight end. It's too easy. Darren Waller's really the only one that ever gives him a competition at tight end 1 at this point. But we're not worried about Darren Waller this week in New York against flying back and forth to Las Vegas. I'm not really worried about the Raiders at all. And you'll hear more about that here in a minute. But my daily tight end, it's tonight's game. If you're playing a showdown or a single game slate tonight, make sure you have Noah Fant in there. The reason I say that, the Chiefs have been exposed at the tight end position. Drew Lock should be back tonight. I think that Noah Fant could have a pretty decent game against Kansas City Chiefs. All right, give me all of that game. We're going Titans versus the Browns, over under 53. And I would never expect it at the beginning of the season. I'd be telling you about the Titans and Browns in week 13. But here we are. 2 teams that have fantasy goodness all over the place, which is pretty surprising. But they do, and it is the highest total of the week. You're going to play all your Titans. I've talked about Tannehill, how he's a streaming option. I also think Corey Davis is in play this week for season long. Low-end flex play if you need it. kind of a high ceiling guy. If you need a boom type player, Corey Davis could be that this week. For the Browns, it's Chubb and it's Jarvis. Those guys are startable. You start them and you don't worry about it there. Kareem Hunt, Austin Hooper, they can be started depending on your roster construction. Not a lot of tight ends out there. So I like Austin Hooper, but I wouldn't be playing him over Tanyan or Kelsey or Waller. I'm probably playing him over most tight ends this week, though. And Baker, I think he's a fine QB2 option. If you're a 2-quarterback league and you need an option, I think he'll be fine there. I would not be playing him in a standard 1-quarterback league. Titans versus the Browns, give me all of that. On the other side of the spectrum, don't like that. We always have one, right? And we're going Bengals, Dolphins. Over under is 42.5. Second straight week here going with the Bengals. Yeah, they're just not the same team without Joe Burrow. And I don't want to play any of them. I want nothing to do with the Cincinnati Bengals and season long and daily and anything this week. Completely off the Bengals. And for the Dolphins, Fitz, I think he's a streaming QB2 play this week. He's got QB1 upside. I just don't think the Bengals are going to push him far enough and hard enough to get him to QB1 on this week. Myles Gaskin, fire him up. He's going to be a great play this week. He's going to be RB2 season long for sure. I think Devontae Parker, he's still startable. You could probably start other guys, but I don't think you're going to, especially with Fitzpatrick playing. That makes Mike Gesicki back in play again. Fitz at quarterback makes this team a lot different than Tua was. Again, I don't think Cincinnati scores enough to push these guys too high of ceilings, but they're going to be still startable. And the Miami defense, I think that's probably going to be one of the top 2 plays of the week. Seattle's defense should be a pretty smash play this week too against Colt McCoy. But I like Miami's defense and what they're going to bring to the table. Cincinnati at Miami, we don't like that. You snooze, you lose. My worst category of the year. Every single week, it seems like the guy I say has a dud of a week. But we're going to do it again. And this week, we're going to go Jonathan Taylor. He's only being started in 48% of leagues. This could just be because you haven't got your lineup set yet this morning. But, he didn't miss last week to an injury. He's not coming off of any kind of illness. He was just a close contact with COVID on Saturday, I think, is when he ended up being deactivated for the week. So we're not worried about Jonathan Taylor and his workload this week because he didn't miss due to an injury or anything. And last time we saw him, he took 26 touches for over 100 yards and 15 fantasy points. Last week, Indianapolis had their lowest rushing total of the year, and Jonathan Taylor didn't play. I think they get right back to Jonathan Taylor this week against Houston, who's given up the most fantasy points to opposing backfields in the AFC. It's a great play. It's a great matchup for Jonathan Taylor. I think Indianapolis can see now, without him last week, how bad they did on the ground. Get him back in there. Get him over 20 touches. Jonathan Taylor, you snooze, you lose. Get him in your starting lineups. Our hit it and quit of the week, Devontae Booker. I told you we'd talk a little bit about him today. Josh Jacobs is out, and Booker, he's had a couple solid weeks this season already. While Josh Jacobs has been healthy, he's got the talent and the skill set to play all 3 downs. He can run the ball. He catch the ball out of the backfield. He does fine pass blocking. So he should get plenty of volume today. Devontae Booker, hit it and quit it. I think he's easily, if you need to just replace Josh Jacobs, you can just put him right in for Josh Jacobs. I'm doing that in the league. He could be a flex play if you need him there. I think you got to get him in against that Jets defense. Devontae Booker, hit it and quit it. Our coulda, woulda, shoulda of the week. Allen Lazard owned in only 30% of leagues. And Rumbling Clan, it is time. We loved Allen Lazard at the beginning of the season. I pounded my fist for him as a flyer. I drafted him so many times. And then he got hurt after 3 solid games to start the season. He looked good last week. He's getting his feet wet. He's been back 2 games now. Last week, he looked fine. I expect him to start getting 6-8 targets every single week. Aaron Rodgers likes him more than he likes MVS. I know MVS will always be the over-the-top guy, but Allen Lazard, I think he's a better wide receiver than MVS, and I think that Aaron Rodgers believes that as well. Detroit, Carolina, Tennessee. That's the 3 matchups that he has for the playoffs starting next week. I think this week he's a low-end flex play just because of the volume, but put him on your bench. You don't have to start him this week. See what happens today, and then fire him up as a flex play starting next week against the Detroit Lions. Allen Lazard, 30% owned right now. Get him on your benches. He could help you win a championship starting next week. Allen Lazard, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Our fallback boy for the week, Justin Herbert. Look, he's going up against Bill Belichick. And if there's one thing that we all know about Bill Belichick, he is a genius at scheming against rookie quarterbacks. He takes away the top options every single week, it seems like. I think Keenan Allen is that top option that they take away today, which means I would lower my expectation on him as well. I already talked about Austin Eckler. I think he's going to have a great game today. And he can catch some of these passes and take it to the house, which will help salvage Justin Herbert's day. So we're not sitting him just to sit him. But I am going to lower my expectations on Justin Herbert, where he's been a top 5-6 quarterback. I could see him down more in the 10 to 14 range today. There may be others that you stream ahead of him. I am streaming Kirk Cousins over Justin Herbert in a league. We'll see how that goes, but I'm telling you that because the things I'm telling you are the things I'm doing in my own leagues as well. Again, don't have to bench Justin Herbert. I'm going to, in that situation, I'm going to actually play him in a 2-quarterback league too. So it's kind of just depends on who you have on your team. Justin Herbert is my fallback boy of week 13. Bold prediction of the week. The New York Football Jets, they're going to upset the Las Vegas Raiders. I know Matt, with our bets from the West, he came on, he told you -7.5. That's what he liked, and that's great. I mean, that's what he likes. That's what he believes in. And I like him, but I'm taking the Jets, baby. That's my bold prediction. Go Jets. That's right, Lucas. Go Jets. Thanks for joining us. And before I go on to the Hear Me Out segment, I do want to remind you, go take a look at my friend's Facebook page over there, Gunsmoke GSPS. He's got some German short-haired pointers that he's going on guided hunts with and looking to start breeding them as well. He's awesome. He's out in Western Kansas, but go give their Facebook page a like, Gunsmoke GSPS. Just follow along, follow the story. It's a great little Western Kansas, rural Kansas story there. So go give him a like on Facebook. And hear me out. It's week 13. All right. Some of you, the playoffs have already started. I'm in 3 leagues. My playoffs have started. The other 6 leagues, they start next week. You might be out of the playoffs already. You might not have a chance. I'm in that situation in multiple leagues. I don't have a chance to make the playoffs no matter what happens this week. Some of them very frustrating. I don't have time this morning to tell you about it. But if you're out of the playoffs and you're in a keeper league, multiple leagues like 1 keeper or 3 keeper, sometimes do 5. Every keeper league is a little bit different. But if you're in a keeper league, go scour your waiver wire this morning. See what you can find. See what's out there. Start preparing for next year. You might find some great finds out there that you don't even think about being on there. But if you're out of the playoffs this season, it doesn't matter who's on your team at this point. You might as well start preparing for next year. For example, I'm in a 1-keeper league. I'm out of the playoffs. No matter what happens today, I cannot make the playoffs because of the way the schedule is. 2, 5, and 6 teams are playing each other. So I can't get to 6 wins in that league. So I go scouring the waiver wire this week, and I found Saquon Barkley. Somebody had dropped him at some point in the season. So now he's on my bench. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm absolutely going to keep him next year. We'll have to see how the offseason goes with the surgeries and the injury and the rehab. But Saquon Barkley was a top 3 pick this season. he could be a keeper. He might be a top 5 pick again next year. If so, I already have a step up on my other league mates because I have Saquon Barkley on my team because I found him on the waiver wire. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean I just want a quantity of guys here. I want to give myself a bunch of options. So here's a couple other guys I'm looking at. A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones is a free agent at the end of this season. So throw A.J. Dillon on the end of your bench. He could be a top 4 round type guy next season. So depending on how your keepers land. Again, it doesn't mean you have to keep him. Just put him on your bench. See how the offseason goes. Will Fuller. He was a top 10 wide receiver before he was suspended. The guy who had him is probably in the playoffs. It could have potentially dropped him because they needed somebody else. Take a look at him. Joe Mixon, he's been on IR for a long time this season. He's already signed long-term in Cincinnati. I think this Cincinnati team takes a step forward next year. Once Mixon gets healthy, Joe Burrow gets back. You're going to like that team. Joe Mixon could potentially be a top 2 round running back next year. Chase Edmonds should already be owned in your league because he should be owned in every league that Kenyon Drake's owned in. But take a look. I saw he's only owned in 75% of ESPN leagues. Kenyon Drake's a free agent this year. He could be moving on. Chase Edmonds could be the lead back there in Arizona next year. And a couple other guys. Damian Williams opted out due to COVID. He was great before he opted out. He could land somewhere next year. Cortland Sutton injured early in this season. He's probably been all leagues. Was a potential top 15 receiver this season. And Odell Beckham Jr., who is hurt as well. So just go out there and look. See what's out there. Again, it doesn't mean you have to keep them, but put them on your bench now because if they're on your bench at the end of the season, that makes them keeper eligible for next season. See how the offseason goes. You don't want some of these guys that you might be running out trying to get into the playoffs, but because they're hot right now, but that doesn't mean they're going to be great next year. You don't need a defense. You don't need a kicker. You're not keeping them. Put some of these other guys on your bench for now because most of the playoffs don't matter if you're out of the playoffs, most of the consolations. So, again, they're all speculative ads, but go check them out, see what you can do there. Thank you for joining me this morning. Good luck in week 13. I hope you make the playoffs. If you're playing daily, I hope you win a little money. But as always, don't overtinker. Go Chiefs.